In the quiet facade of Dupree, where every porch light masks the shadows beneath, a single photograph ignites a storm no one is prepared to face. Naomi thought the past had been buried with the lies Randy whispered a decade ago. She built her life on the fragile illusion of distance from the night her child vanished, from the betrayal that carved scars into her soul. But when a photo of a newborn arrives in her mailbox, a baby with Randy's unmistakable eyes, the ground beneath her carefully constructed world begins to crack. In that moment, she realizes the truth was never gone. It was watching. Waiting. Rotting beneath the surface like a wound that refuses to heal. And now, the town of Dupree is about to drown in secrets it thought it had long forgotten. The envelope arrived on a silent, gray afternoon. It was thin, ordinary, damp from the rain, yet inside it lay a weight that crushed Naomi's lungs before she even realized why. The moment she tore it open and pulled out the photograph, the world tilted on its axis. A baby's face stared back at her, round cheeks, faintly curled lips, a look of quiet innocence. But what seized her wasn't the child itself. It was the face. It was him. It was Randy. Her heart staggered in her chest like a creature cornered. Every part of that tiny face echoed him with surgical precision. The shape of the eyes. The curve of the mouth. The jawline too eerily familiar to be a coincidence. It wasn't a simple resemblance. It was a mirror. The photograph blurred in her trembling hands, but not because of tears. Naomi wasn't crying. She was sinking into a kind of frozen panic that reached back a decade, clawing through the carefully laid bricks of her present to tear open the wound she had buried so deeply she no longer believed it was real. 10 years ago, Randy had stripped her of everything. The memory didn't come like a gentle wave. It crashed like a black tide. She remembered the sterile hospital corridors. The way his hand rested on her shoulder as if offering comfort when in truth it was a shackle. She remembered how his voice had sounded, calm, polished, rehearsed, when he told her that the child could not exist. Not, should not. Could not. Because if the truth of that child's bloodline ever saw daylight, it would burn through his entire world like wildfire. She remembered the papers she signed under duress, the way she was made to disappear, the way her own child was reduced to a stain to be wiped clean. This child, he had said back then, will never exist. And for 10 long years, the world obeyed that lie. But someone had sent her this photograph now. Someone had ripped open the coffin of silence. And that someone either wanted her destroyed, or wanted the truth to finish what it started. In the days that followed, Naomi became a ghost trapped in her own house. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every shadow stretched longer than it should have. Every noise from the mailbox made her skin crawl. She checked the locks twice. Then 4 times. She counted every second between midnight and dawn. The quiet no longer felt like safety. It felt like a trap tightening around her. The anger didn't explode. It burned low, steady, venomous. A decade of fear had hardened into something sharper. She hated him. She hated herself more. For trusting him. For surrendering. For allowing her child to be erased like a smudge on glass. But Randy was still the community's golden son. He still held court at every gathering, smiling with perfect teeth, shaking hands with the kind of casual ease only men who believe they are untouchable possess. His name was engraved on foundations. His voice shaped opinions. And his lies were so deeply rooted they had become indistinguishable from the truth itself. That changed the night Naomi walked into the community hall. The gathering was meant to be routine. A neighborhood meeting about development plans and security patrols. A neutral, polished evening in the manicured heart of Dupree. But Naomi wasn't there to listen. She was there to destroy. In her pocket was a USB drive no one else knew existed. On it, a recording, his voice, 10 years old but unmistakable. Randy, ordering his people to erase every trace of the child. It was the kind of command that didn't sound desperate. It sounded imperial. Cold. Final. When the recording echoed through the room, it sliced through the polished surface of Dupree like a blade. His voice filled every corner of the hall, every breath between heartbeats. At first, the silence was total. Then came the crack. People turned toward him, slowly at first, like a single organism awakening to the stench of rot. His mask shattered in real time. Randy stood at the podium, face tightening, pulse visible in the veins along his neck. The man who had built a decade of image, immaculate, composed, adored, suddenly seemed small. The neighbors who had once hung on his every word now stared as if a stranger was standing there. Their golden figurehead was just a man. And worse, a man capable of unspeakable things. Naomi could feel their eyes flick toward her too, calculating, shifting, uncertain whether to rally behind her or recoil from her rage. But then the doors opened. And everything broke. The boy entered. Not a baby anymore. A teenager, tall, pale, standing beneath the harsh fluorescent light like a living curse. The room seemed to constrict around him. His face carried Randy's features with such precision it became unbearable to look at. But beneath it, in the eyes, the shape of the jaw, the defiance in his posture, Naomi saw herself. The child she lost. The child who had been declared non-existent. His presence didn't just expose Randy. It annihilated him. There was no more plausible deniability. No more carefully managed narratives. The past had come home in human flesh. The crowd reacted like a single living thing. Some gasped, some whispered, others rose from their seats as if pulled upward by invisible strings. Camera phones blinked to life. Whispers became murmurs. Murmurs became a storm. The empire of Randy Dupree, built on charm, power, and silence, began to collapse under the weight of a single boy's existence. Naomi stood still, the world spinning around her. She should have felt vindicated. She didn't. What she felt was a deep, guttural rage tangled with grief, grief for the 10 stolen years, for the countless nights she spent convincing herself she could move on, for the person she had to become to survive. The media descended within hours. What had once been whispered in hushed tones became headline material. Articles bled across every screen. Reporters swarmed outside Randy's mansion like vultures around a carcass. His face, once a symbol of trust, became a warning. His name, once currency, turned into a liability. But beneath the noise of the scandal, darker currents stirred. Naomi became the center of it all, even when she didn't want to. They called her brave. They called her dangerous. They called her a liar. They called her a hero. Everyone claimed to know her story, but none of them knew what it felt like to be silenced for a decade. None of them knew the taste of being erased. The boy, her boy, became both a symbol and a target. Raised away from this place, shaped by strangers, he had never asked for this war. He was a weapon forged in someone else's fire. And now, every pair of eyes wanted something from him. Validation. Revenge. Proof. Forgiveness. A legacy. He couldn't give any of it. He walked through the streets of Dupree like a ghost wearing flesh. People stared too long. Some whispered his name. Others spat it like poison. He carried on his face the evidence of their collective sin. Meanwhile, Randy rotted in plain sight. He had spent years building a kingdom on illusions. He thought charm was armor, influence was eternal. But influence isn't eternal when the foundation is rot. His allies peeled away like skin under heat. His phone stopped ringing. The same faces that once praised him now denied knowing him. He locked himself in his house, curtains drawn, watching his reputation bleed out on every news channel. And in the darkness, the fear began to fester. For the first time, Randy saw himself not as the puppeteer, but as the prey. He imagined the whispers in every corner of town. He imagined Naomi watching. He imagined the boy he once erased standing outside his gate, waiting. He imagined the world judging him with the same cruelty he once reserved for others. And what terrified him most wasn't the public's hatred. It was their apathy. The fact that the empire he built could vanish overnight without anyone lifting a finger to save him. But Naomi was not free either. She spent nights staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every choice she ever made. She thought exposing him would end something. Instead, it opened a chasm. She was no longer the woman who suffered in silence. She was now the woman who detonated a town. And once you light the fuse, there is no returning to quiet. The boy's existence unraveled everything. Not just Randy's empire, but Naomi's own identity. She was not a victim anymore. She was a mother who had lost her child to power, a woman who had been complicit, however unwillingly, in burying the truth. She could feel the community's judgment lurking beneath their sympathy. She could feel the eyes that accused her of not fighting hard enough back then. Guilt, like rust, crept into every corner of her soul. The Dupree community fractured like glass. Some defended Randy, clinging to the illusion that he was framed. Others sided with Naomi, elevating her into something she never wanted to be, a symbol. The polite smiles that once held the town together turned to tight-lipped suspicion. Fences felt higher. Windows closed earlier. The neighborhood wasn't safe anymore. It had never been. And through it all, the boy watched. He had grown up learning not to trust faces. The orphanage had taught him silence. Life had taught him distance. Now the world wanted him to be the missing piece that made their morality whole. But he wasn't a puzzle piece. He was a scar. His presence didn't fix anything. It only made the wound visible. Naomi tried to reach for him more than once, but her hands stopped in midair. How do you claim someone you abandoned? How do you love someone whose existence was erased by the choices forced upon you? How do you bridge a decade of silence with nothing but blood? She didn't know. Randy, stripped of power, grasped at what was left. Lawyers. PR teams. Carefully worded statements. It didn't matter. Every move only made the spectacle bigger. His house became a cage. His name became a weapon in other people's mouths. The man who once commanded a room now couldn't command a whisper. In the end, there was no final confrontation. No redemption arc. Only a slow, relentless erosion. Naomi stood at her window one night, the rain drumming against the glass. Outside, lights flickered through the mist. The town buzzed with gossip, with fury, with the pleasure people take in watching the powerful fall. But none of it felt like victory. It felt like a scar being ripped open and forced to bleed in front of everyone. Randy sat in the dark across town, counting the things he'd lost like a miser counting coins. He thought the silence would protect him. It was the silence that destroyed him. The boy stood alone on the hill that overlooked Dupree. His existence had toppled a kingdom, but it hadn't brought him peace. He was a living reminder, not just to them, but to himself, that the past doesn't stay buried. It festers. No one in Dupree would ever go back to who they were before that photograph arrived. Naomi lost her illusions. Randy lost his empire. The boy lost the possibility of a quiet life. The world didn't end in flames. It ended in exposure. And in the cold, endless silence that followed, rage didn't fade. It settled in. It made a home. The night in Dupree grew heavy, pressing down like a suffocating hand. The faces that once smiled at each other in the open fields now stared with silent accusation, as if every brick, every tree, every inch of this town had been built on a lie. Naomi stood on the edge of the crowd, her body trembling but her gaze steady, fixed on the shattered man who once controlled everything. Randy's world had collapsed in front of the people he once manipulated with ease. The recordings, the child, the truth, they had stripped him bare. No more power. No more masks. Only the raw, unforgiving light of everything he tried to bury. The boy, her son, stood between them, a living reminder of the sins they both carried. He was not just a child lost, he was proof that every decision, every silence, every cowardly choice had consequences that could grow, breathe, and return. Naomi felt the weight of the years she had spent hating herself, hating Randy, hating the entire world for letting this happen. But beneath that rage burned something colder, the clarity of knowing that there was no going back. Around them, the whispers began to swell. Names. Accusations. Fear. The town that once adored Randy was now turning against him like a pack sensing blood. His downfall wasn't just a spectacle, it was a reckoning. Naomi could feel it, this wasn't the end of a story. It was the tearing open of an old wound, one that would bleed through everyone who had ever looked away. And as she locked eyes with the son she never got to raise, Naomi understood the cruel truth: justice had come, but it would not save them. It would consume everything.